He didn't mean to fall asleep. The old Ford was still ticking from the long drive, windshield fogged at the edges, school lights throwing pale yellow beams across the empty parking lot. It was 5:47 a.m. Too early for anyone but the janitor and the delivery trucks. And Daniel had told himself he'd just close his eyes for 10 minutes, just enough to let the headache ease, just enough to stop his shoulders from throbbing after the night shift. 10 minutes became 30. 30 became an hour. And when the first teachers started pulling in, they saw something they didn't expect. A pickup parked under the far oak engine off, and a man in a work shirt sleeping in the driver's seat like he lived there. He jerked awake at the sound of car doors slamming. For a second, he didn't know where he was. Then he saw the brick front of Maple Ridge Elementary, the flagpole, the banner that read, "Every child can learn." He scrubbed his face, checked the clock, swore under his breath. He'd meant to go inside with his son like normal, pretend like everything was fine, like they hadn't spent the night in a parking lot, because gas and rent had fought and rent had won. He looked in the rearview mirror. In the back seat, curled under his Avengers blanket, 8-year-old Noah was still asleep. Mouth slightly open, hair crushed on one side. The backpack sat beside him, packed the night before. 2 notebooks, a worn pencil case, lunch his dad had thrown together at 1 a.m. peanut butter sandwich, apple, a little note that said, "Do your best, Dad." Daniel's chest softened. At least the kid had slept. At least he hadn't woken up in the middle of the night to ask, "Are we home yet?" Because this was home. For last night, anyway. He cracked the window to let the cold in, hoping it'd wake him up faster. The air smelled like wet asphalt and cafeteria pancakes. He checked himself. Work pants, steel-toed boots, shirt with the company logo. He didn't look homeless. He looked like a tired dad who'd gotten here too early. That's what he told himself. A car pulled in 2 spots over. A woman in a grey cardigan got out, balancing a stack of folders. She glanced at him, did a small double take. He pretended to look at his phone. Another car pulled up. Trickle of staff. The school was waking up. "Dad?" came a small voice from the back. He turned. "Hey, buddy. Morning. Did we? Are we at school already?" "Yeah," he said lightly. "Told you I'd get you here on time." Noah yawned, sat up, rubbing his eyes. He looked around, confusion flickering. Did we sleep here? For a heartbeat, Daniel's stomach dropped. Kids saw everything. He forced a smile. Just for today. Daddy got off late and didn't want to drive all the way back and make you late. So we camped. Like an adventure. Like a car camp? Noah said, instantly charmed by the idea. Exactly. Like a car camp. He thanked God, not for the first time, that kids would accept almost anything if you give it to them kindly. They were about to get out when someone knocked on the driver's side window. He startled. A figure stood outside, tall, coat on, ID, lanyard around her neck. Not a teacher, not a janitor. The principal. She gave him a polite, professional smile through the glass. The smile said, "Good morning." The eyes said, "I noticed." He rolled the window down halfway. "Morning," he said, trying to sound casual. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Miss Carter, principal here, of course. Of all mornings for the principal to be early. I saw your truck when I pulled in," she continued, voice calm, warm but firm. "Have you been here long?" He could lie. Say 5 minutes. Say they were just waiting for the doors to open. But fog still clung to the inside of the windows, and the blanket in the back seat gave them away. He swallowed. "Just overnight," he said quietly. "We got in late." Her eyes flicked to the back, softened when she saw Noah in his blanket. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. "Hi," Noah said shyly, clutching his backpack. The principal looked back at Daniel. "Is everything okay?" The question was simple, but it hit like a spotlight. "Everything okay?" No, he was 2 weeks behind on the electric. His landlord had sent a final notice. His second job was too far from the motel they'd been staying in, and driving back and forth would have burned the gas they needed to get Noah to school. So he'd parked here, where it was safe, where cameras watched, where his son could sleep without sirens outside. But you can't spill all that in a parking lot at 6:15 a.m. We're okay, he said. Just had to make sure he got to school. Her expression didn't change, but she didn't believe him. Good principals don't. They're trained to notice bags under kids' eyes, changes in lunches, sudden absences. They're trained to hear what isn't said. You know, she said, the building opens earlier for staff. You could have waited inside. He shook his head. Didn't want to bother anyone. It wouldn't be a bother. There was a brief, almost imperceptible tension. The kind that says, I'm offering, will you trust me? Before he could answer, another car pulled in. A teacher called, Morning, Miss Carter. The principal waved back, then lowered her voice again. Can you come inside for a minute? She asked. Both of you. He hesitated, shame twitching in his jaw. He didn't want to walk in through the staff door, didn't want eyes on him, didn't want to be the story in the teacher's lounge. Did you see that Dad's sleeping in the parking lot? I don't want him to be late, he said. He won't be, she said, and I'm not mad. I just want to understand. That was the unexpected turn, not scolding, not you can't do that, not we'll have to call someone. Just I want to understand. It was disarming. He nodded. Okay, yeah, we can come in. He helped Noah into his jacket, smoothed his hair, made him look less like a kid who'd slept in a truck. They got out. The morning air was cold against their faces. As they walked toward the side entrance, Daniel could feel eyes on him. 2 teachers chatting by their cars, the janitor unlocking the gym. Maybe they weren't staring. Maybe it was just his own fear amplifying everything, but he felt seen. Inside, the school was warm and smelled like floor polish and bulletin boards. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a music teacher was playing scales. The principal led them to her office, small room with kids' drawings on the wall and a coffee maker in the corner. She gestured to the chairs. Have a seat. Noah sat swinging his legs. Daniel stayed half standing, like he might bolt. She sat behind her desk but didn't turn on the computer. This wasn't paperwork, this was human. So, she said gently, talk to me. Why were you out there? He took a slow breath. Pride and desperation warred inside him. He didn't want his son labeled. Didn't want Cephas thinking he was neglectful. Didn't want pity. But he also couldn't keep burning nights like this. We're in between places right now, he said carefully. I work nights. Sometimes it makes more sense to stay close than to drive back and forth. That makes sense, she said, and he could tell she meant it. Where are you staying? A friend's. Sometimes a motel. Sometimes. He shrugged. Sometimes I just make it work. She nodded, her eyes kind. How long has this been going on? A few weeks. Have you missed any school? She asked, looking at Noah. No, Noah said. Dad says school is the thing we never miss. Something in her expression shifted at that. Respect. He's right, she said. There was a pause. Then came the part that tightened the room. You know, we have to think about safety, she said, still gentle. Sleeping in the parking lot isn't allowed. I can't have you doing that regularly. There it was. The rule. The faintly threatening edge. Not because she was cruel, because she was responsible. Schools have policies, liability, regulations. He nodded, jaw tightening. I get it, he said. We won't do it again. But inside, panic cracked open. If he couldn't park here, where would he go on nights when the motel money ran out? Where could he sleep, where his kid wouldn't hear shouting outside? Where he could walk him to school without being late? Where he could be sure his son was safe? The principal watched him, saw the way his eyes dropped. She knew that look. She'd seen it on other parents, single mums fleeing, grandparents suddenly guardians, families in cars after fires. The look of, I don't have another option. She leaned forward. What if, she said slowly, like she was testing a bridge before she stepped on it, we made a different arrangement? He blinked. What do you mean? I mean, she said, if the problem is distance and timing, then maybe the problem isn't you. Maybe it's that we haven't made room for you yet. He stared at her, not understanding. And that was how it began. The day a tired single dad, caught sleeping in his truck outside his son's school, discovered that sometimes the person who catches you isn't trying to punish you. They're trying to build you a door. For a moment, he just stared at her, trying to decode the sentence. Make room for you wasn't language he was used to hearing from schools. He was used to, you have to fill this form, or we can't release him without a guardian, or that's not our responsibility. This sounded like the opposite, like someone moving a chair so he could sit. I don't want to cause trouble, he said finally. We're managing. Last night was one of those nights. I believe you, Miss Carter said. But I also saw your son asleep in the back of a truck at 6 a.m. in winter. That tells me you're managing harder than you should have to. He swallowed. Shame and relief did a strange dance in his chest. She turned to Noah. Sweetheart, can you wait right outside the office for a minute? Miss Susan's at her desk. She's got coloring pages. Okay, Noah said, sliding off his chair. He looked at his dad, just to check. Daniel nodded. When the door clicked shut behind him, the air got heavier. Off the record, she said quietly, are you homeless right now? It was the kind of question that makes a man feel like he's shrinking. He opened his mouth to deny it, to say no, we're just between places, the way people soften hard truths. But he heard his son humming outside. He heard the scrape in his own voice, and he was so tired. We're not on the street, he said, but I'm behind. Got pushed out of the apartment. I'm working nights out of town. Friend's couch is already full. The motel is killing me with gas. Some nights it just makes more sense to park somewhere safe until morning. She didn't flinch. And you chose here. It's lit. It's close to him. Cameras. He gave a small, embarrassed smile. Felt like the safest place I could think of. That makes sense, she said again. I'm glad you chose here. Then she added, and this was the first unexpected turn. You're not the first parent. He blinked. I'm not. She shook her head. We've had families living out of cars in the neighborhood for years. Most try to hide. Some don't tell us at all, and that makes it harder to help. I'd rather know. He let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Somehow, knowing he wasn't the only one didn't fix anything, but it made him feel less like a failure and more like a statistic. And statistics could be helped. But I meant what I said, she went on. You can't keep sleeping in the lot. People will start asking questions, and once district or CPS gets involved without context, everyone's job gets harder, especially yours. There was the faintly threatening note again, not because she wanted to use it, but because it was real. Systems had rules. He nodded, jaw tight. I get it. That's why we do this my way instead, she said, a spark in her eyes. She opened a drawer, pulled out a thin folder with a blue stripe. We have a Families in Transition program. It's supposed to be for students, but it gives us certain powers to support the whole household: gas cards, laundry vouchers, after-school care, sometimes partnerships with churches for temporary housing. Most people don't know it exists. He stared. We qualify. If you're sleeping in a vehicle, yes, she said plainly. Federal definition. Doesn't matter if you're working. Homeless isn't just people on sidewalks, Mr. Holt. He realized then she'd looked up his name in the system. It's anyone without a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. That's you right now. He looked away, blinking fast. He didn't like the word, but he couldn't argue with it. She flipped the folder open. "There's a shower in the staff gym," she said. "It's not fancy, but it's clean. If you bring him early, I can arrange for the custodian to let you in. He doesn't have to come to class tired or feeling less than." He stared. "You'd do that?" "I'd rather have him clean, fed, and ready to learn than proud and exhausted," she said. "And I'd rather have you warm for an hour." The generosity of it made his throat close. It wasn't a check. It wasn't a lecture. It was something embarrassingly practical, water and dignity. "There's more," she said, sensing his hesitation. "We have a parent room down the hall. It's supposed to be for meetings. It sits empty half the time. If you need somewhere to wait between dropping him off and going to work, you can sit there. Computer, coffee. No one will bother you." He shook his head in disbelief. "Why?" She looked at him like it was obvious. "Because you showed up," she said. "Because your son is here every day. Because you slept in a truck to make sure he didn't miss school. That tells me who you are. We invest in those families." He pressed the heel of his hand to his forehead. He hadn't cried in front of anyone but his kid in years. He was not going to start now in front of a principal. "Look," she added, softer, "schools are the only place some kids have that's stable. If their parent is wobbling, we steady the parent. That's the job. They didn't tell us that in principal school, but it's the job." He laughed wetly. "They don't tell us how to do this either. I know," she said. For a moment the two of them sat in that small office, one man, one woman, bridged by a kid's attendance record. Outside, the bell rang for early breakfast. Voices filled the hall. The day was starting. Then came the next reveal, the deeper layer. "There is one more thing," she said, measuring her words. "And I want you to hear it as help, not as punishment." He straightened, wary. "Okay. If you tell me ahead of time," she said, "that you don't have a place to go that night, I can connect you to a partner church that opens its hall. It's quiet, supervised, families only. No police report, no drama, just a warm place to sleep. But I need you to tell me. Don't make me find you in the parking lot." He stared, then laughed once, disbelieving. "You're serious?" "I'm very serious." "You'd do all that for us?" "I'll do it for him," she said, nodding toward the door. "Which means doing it for you." He went quiet again. Because under all of this, under the folder and the shower and the room, there was the thing he tried not to say out loud. "I'm doing everything I can, and it's still not enough." And here was someone saying, "Okay, then we'll add what you can't." He scrubbed his hand over his face. "Thank you," he managed. "I didn't want him to get in trouble." "He's not in trouble," she said. "You're not in trouble. You're just seen." That sentence went straight through him. A knock sounded on the office door. "Miss Carter?" It was the secretary. "Bus 3 is late and Miss Porter needs—" "Sorry." She peeked in, saw Daniel, saw the single dad posture, the tired eyes. She softened. "Take your time." The principal smiled. "We'll be right out." When the door closed again, she slid a small card across the desk. "This is my direct line. If you're ever stuck, call. Even if it's 5 a.m. He took it like it was made of glass. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," she said. "You're a parent." He nodded, tucking the card carefully into his wallet behind an old photo of Noah. For the first time in weeks, the panic in his chest eased. Then she did the unthinkable. Not the shower, not the room, not the referral. This. "I can also put you on payroll," she said. He frowned. "What?" "We have a few hours a week for extra custodial help. It's only minimum, but it's on site. You're already here early. If you wanted to mop the halls before the bell, or help unload the breakfast boxes, I can sign you on. That way you're not just the dad sleeping in the truck. You're Mr. Holt who helps out in the morning. Labels matter." He stared at her like she'd handed him a lifeline. Because she had. She wasn't just giving charity. She was giving him a role, a way to exist in the building without shame. "I can do that," he said quickly. "I can work. I want to work." "I know," she said, smiling. "That's why I asked." She stood. "Let's get him to class." They stepped into the hall. Kids were streaming in now, backpacks, sneakers squeaking, laughter bouncing off the walls. Noah was at the secretary's desk coloring a dinosaur. He hopped down when he saw his dad. "All good?" he asked. "All good," Daniel said, ruffling his hair. "Am I in trouble?" Noah whispered. "No," the principal said, kneeling to his level. "But I did find out something very important." "What?" "That you have a dad who will sleep in a truck to make sure you get to school," she said. "That's a pretty big deal." Noah grinned, proud. "Yeah, he always does stuff like that." The principal looked up at Daniel with a knowing smile, like, "I figured." Then she took Noah's hand. "Come on, I'll walk you to class. And when you're done, maybe you'll see your dad helping us in the hallway." "Really?" Noah said, eyes wide. "Really? He's on the team now." They disappeared down the hall, the boy chattering, the principal listening. Daniel stood there, alone for a second, staring at the office door they'd just come from. A small, ordinary door in a public school that had just turned into a doorway out of humiliation. He looked out the window toward the parking lot where his trucks are cold, old, loyal. He thought of last night, of trying to sleep upright, of checking the mirrors every 15 minutes. And he knew that was probably the last night he'd have to do it that way, because someone inside the building knew now. And when schools know, they move. Quietly, slowly, bureaucratically, but they move. What he didn't see, not yet, was the custodian, watching from the end of the hall, the one who'd seen other parents in cars before, the one who'd started stockpiling blankets in the supply closet. He'd tell his church that night, "We've got another one," and the circle would widen again. He came back the next morning before sunrise, the same truck, the same parking lot. Only this time, it wasn't out of desperation, it was because he had a key. The principal had left it taped to her office door with a note, "Staff access, welcome aboard." He held it in his hand for a long moment, the cool metal pressing against his palm, as if it carried weight beyond its size. Then he unlocked the side entrance, stepping into the dim corridor. The smell of waxed floors and printer ink greeted him like an old friend. Daniel started mopping quietly, the sound of the bucket wheels echoing faintly. The janitor, Mr. Ruiz, an older man with kind eyes, appeared halfway down the hall. "You the new early guy?" he asked. "Guess so," Daniel said. Ruiz grinned. "Then you're with me. Come on, I'll show you the routine." It was simple work sweeping, setting out breakfast milk cartons, stacking chairs. But to Daniel, it felt like a promotion from invisibility. He wasn't that dad in the truck anymore. He was staff. And when the bell rang and kids started filing in, he stood by the hallway with his mop and felt a strange, quiet pride. Noah walked by with his backpack bouncing, spotted his dad, and beamed. "You're here. Every morning now," Daniel said. The boy puffed out his chest. "My dad works at school." That sentence alone was worth more than a paycheck. By the end of the week, Daniel's world had shifted. Miss Carter kept her promises. She arranged for gas cards, gave him contact with a local shelter that didn't separate families, and even found a parent group that shared job listings. Every day she'd nod at him in the hall, no words needed, just a look that said, "Keep going." But one Friday morning something changed. It started when he noticed Noah's teacher, Miss Williams, whispering with the principal. Their faces were serious. When Daniel passed by, the conversation stopped. He didn't think much of it until noon, when Miss Carter called him into her office again. He entered, wiping his hands on his work shirt. "Something wrong?" She gestured to a chair. Please, sit. There's something I need to tell you. He felt that old panic rising. Is it about my hours? I can take fewer. No, she interrupted softly. This isn't about work. She took a breath. It's about Noah. The world stilled. Is he okay? He's fine, she assured quickly. Better than fine, actually. He wrote something. He frowned. Wrote something. She slid a paper across the desk, lined notebook paper with uneven handwriting. The top read, "My hero." "I was cleaning up in his classroom," she said, "and found this in the writing folder. His teacher wanted you to see it." He picked it up, hands trembling slightly. It read, "My hero is my dad. He works at night and still brings me to school. Sometimes we sleep in the car, but he says it's our adventure. He tells jokes, even when he's tired. He says we don't need a big house, just big hearts. My dad is my favorite person because he never quits, even when it's hard." By the time he reached the last line, the words blurred. He set the paper down, blinking fast. He wrote this in class. She nodded. They were supposed to write about firefighters or athletes. He wrote about you. Daniel swallowed. "I didn't want him to remember the hard parts." "He doesn't," she said gently. "He remembers the love." Silence filled the room, thick, holy. He stared at the wall of student photos, every smile suddenly more fragile, more miraculous. How many of those faces went home to uncertainty and still showed up ready to learn? Miss Carter's voice broke the quiet. "We're planning an assembly next month. For a Family Appreciation Day, we'd like to read his piece, and, if you're comfortable, to recognize you." He shook his head instantly. No, please, don't make a scene out of us. I'm just trying to get by." "It's not a scene," she said. "It's an example. There are others, Daniel. Other parents quietly sleeping in parking lots, pretending everything's fine. You'd give them permission to come forward." He looked at her, conflicted. Pride battled gratitude again. But this time, gratitude won. "Okay," he whispered, "if it helps someone else." When he walked out of the office, the halls were filled with laughter and backpacks slamming into lockers. Ordinary life. Yet everything looked different now, brighter, sharper, as if the air itself had decided he could finally breathe it fully. That night, they didn't sleep in the truck. Miss Carter had arranged a temporary apartment through the church network, a small studio with peeling paint, but it had a bed and running water. Noah fell asleep instantly, his head on his dad's arm. Daniel lay awake longer, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the heater. For the first time in months, the sound wasn't traffic or rain on the windshield. It was stillness. It was safety. He whispered into the dark, "We made it, kid." The next morning, sunlight filtered through a curtain for once. Not through car glass, but fabric. Real curtains. He got up early, made toast, and left for work at the school with a lighter step. Weeks passed. Word of the truck dad quietly spread, not as gossip, but as inspiration. Teachers started keeping extra food in classrooms. The PTA launched a weekend meal fund. Even the janitors pitched in, starting a box labeled, "In case someone needs it." The community moved like a tide, pulled by something bigger than charity, by empathy. When the assembly finally arrived, the auditorium buzzed. Parents filled the seats. Kids fidgeted in folding chairs. Daniel sat near the back, trying to stay invisible. Then Noah's teacher took the stage and read aloud from the paper. The words echoed through the microphone, simple, childlike, piercing. "My hero is my dad. Because he never quits, even when it's hard." People turned. Faces softened. By the time it ended, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Miss Carter motioned for Daniel to stand. But he didn't need to. Noah ran straight to him, wrapping his arms around his waist as the crowd clapped. Afterward, as the hall emptied, Daniel stood by the exit with Miss Carter. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "I did," she replied. Because one story like yours can shift an entire school. He looked at her, the corners of his mouth lifting. You know, I used to think sleeping in that truck was the lowest point of my life. And now? She asked. He glanced toward the stage, where his son's crumpled paper still rested on the podium. Now, I think it was where everything began. Outside, the afternoon sun spilled over the schoolyard. Kids were running, laughing, chasing each other in the light. Daniel closed his eyes for a second and let the warmth hit his face. He didn't see the older janitor, Mr. Ruiz, stop at the gate, handing a blanket from the supply closet to another father waiting by a car. But he would hear about it later, because that's how loops begin, again quietly, invisibly, in the spaces where compassion learns to multiply. Months later, winter returned to the town, cold, quiet, the kind that painted the mornings silver. But everything was different now. The same parking lot that once held an exhausted father and his sleeping son now shimmered with light from the school's new sign. Maple Ridge Community Care Center, no family left behind. Daniel stood by his truck, watching as volunteers unloaded boxes of food, coats, and blankets. He still wore his work boots and faded jacket, but now there was a name badge pinned to his chest. Facilities Assistant, Family Liaison. The title made him smile every time he saw it. It wasn't about rank, it was about redemption. Across the lot, Noah was helping carry small boxes into the gym. He looked taller, stronger. When he spotted his dad, he waved both arms wildly. They said we helped start this. Daniel laughed, rubbing his neck. Guess we did, buddy. Inside the gym, Ms. Carter was organizing tables with other staff. She caught his eye and nodded. Simple gesture, but full of pride. Months ago, she'd found a father in a truck. Now she was watching a man rebuild his life in the very place he'd once hidden in shame. The event was small but powerful. Parents who once whispered about needing help were now speaking openly, exchanging recipes and job leads, laughing together. The biscuit tin that had once sat in Miss Carter's office now sat in the center of the room, surrounded by donation envelopes. Someone had written across it in pink marker, "For US always." When the day ended, Daniel stayed behind to sweep the gym floor. The echo of laughter still hung in the air. He paused by the window, looking out at the dark parking lot that used to be his bedroom. He whispered, almost to himself, "You see that, kid? We turned a parking lot into hope." Noah, half asleep on the bleachers, mumbled, "That's what heroes do, right?" Daniel smiled softly. "That's what love does." Outside, snow began to fall, slough, forgiving. The same truck sat beneath the oak tree, engine silent, no longer a shelter but a reminder. And somewhere beyond the school gates, another father sat in his car under a streetlight, watching the flakes drift down, not knowing that by morning, someone from Maple Ridge would knock on his window and say the same words Miss Carter once said, "I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to make room." The loop had quietly begun again.